one.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Weekend Gameplan with Marcus Hersh. I'm Dan Illman alongside DRF handicapper and analyst Marcus Hersh, who has three value plays this weekend for you, beginning with the Pegasus World Cup. Let's throw up the field for the Grade 1 $3 million race. And the two morning line favorites, Omaha Beach, spun to run. Well, they're out, and that's the big story of the race, Marcus.
Yeah, it's going to be considerably harder to extract value from this race with those two horses out. I went into the race, looking to play against both of those horses for reasons that aren't worth getting into since they're not running. But yeah, I mean, it really kind of saps the energy in a lot of ways, not just from a quality perspective, but from a value perspective. I couldn't see taking out either one of those sources at the published odds, which were, probably fairly reasonable. And now, like, the prices you might have hoped to get on some of these presumed second tier contenders are vanishing. But still an interesting race, and $3 million. I kind of felt compelled to give it a go and try to find someone to play in here.
And I guess the two favorites now will be Higher Power and Mucho Gusto, both coming from Southern California. Higher Power, of course, won the Pacific Classic, third in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I go back to that Pacific Classic, and I have mixed feelings about it. He ran very well, but wasn't that a race where a lot of the notable names just no-showed?
Yeah, but I mean, that's true. But I do think that it established a kind of his baseline as being higher than maybe we would have thought it was before. And even though he was a well-beaten third in his two subsequent starts, he pretty much lost all chance in the Awesome again. And, he just spun his wheels in the Breeders' Cup like 80% or something of all the horses that ran on that really funky dirt track. I don't know where the form came from because I was familiar with the horse previously from his being a Fairgrounds, a track that I cover. But I do think he's going to have a pretty good year as a 5-year-old. I prefer him going a little bit longer. I wonder if he might be kind of a Dubai World Cup sort of horse going 2,000 meters. And I don't love him at a short price here. I think he will and eventually be most effective as like a open galloping type. And I don't know that he's going to get the right kind of trip in this race. I think there are horses here that are faster than he is. He's going to be in the second tier. He might not be in the clear really. Might be inside and behind. We'll see what happens. I don't love him, and I don't love Mucho Gusto. Mucho Gusto is a horse and that I have a hard time getting a read on. His Haskell really wasn't too bad. His Travers wasn't too bad. I would say those two races exceeded my expectations, but I don't know if that was just him maxing out and he really is meant to be more of a miler type as an older horse, or if he really that's just a signal of the horse he can become. He certainly didn't end the year in especially fine fashion, finishing a fading fourth in the Oklahoma Derby.
Well, you and I have kind of kicked around the 3-year-old crop from 2019. One of them, Tax, though, seems to be perhaps improving at the right time. We're going to take a look at his most recent race, the Discovery, and he weaved his way through in between horses. He has dead aim on Performer in the stretch, and he just couldn't seal the deal. But something tells me that Shug McGahee's Performer, if he stays sound this year, is going to be a really good 4-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what his ceiling is. He started really coming around during the summer last year, and he ran a tremendous race in the Discovery. It's really, I mean, it's a funny game. Tax is a horse that I've been against forever. I was really against him in the Jim Dandy when he won pretty nicely, but I was ready to play this horse, Dan, even one of those other two horses in the race where he would have been, to me, an appealing price. His price is going way down now. He may be close to second choice. I'm not going to love him if he's something like 7-2. That's going to be tough to take. But I mean, if you go over his entire 3-year-old body of work, I thought he was going to be fluky through the winter, but I think he showed that he was more than that. His established baseline performance, even in a relatively weak crop, is decent. And I agree with you. I think his Discovery was solid, and it was a race he might have kind of needed. He hadn't run since August. I watched on XBTV his recent workouts. He destroyed a workmate in the January 9th workout. It was a joke. I don't know who the workmate was, but he he couldn't have been happy afterward. But it was like that 51-2. It's really interesting watching workouts. That doesn't look like much on paper, but this horse was under an absolute stranglehold to be kept in hand. He looks like he's ready to run through the bridle. I think he's going to get a great trip in this race. And I think that, whatever his merits are, I kind of feel like 1.125 at Gulfstream could be the very best thing this horse could do. So I'm a tax man on this day.
I tend to agree. The taxman perhaps cometh in the Pegasus World Cup. We will move to the Pegasus World Cup Turf, and this is just a wide open affair, going 1 3/16. You can't knock anything Magic Wand has done on the track. It's kind of unfortunate she doesn't win more often, but what more can you ask of her? She's competed at the highest level in Australia, Hong Kong, France, England, Ireland, and in North America, and she drew a lousy post position in the Pegasus.
Yeah, she really did draw poorly. I hate this draw for her. But I do, like you, have become a great admirer of the horse. I didn't, probably this time last year, I didn't think she was this good. But her Irish champion behind Magical, really, really nice performance. The Cox Plate was very good. The Melbourne Cup was too far, probably, and the race wasn't run to suit at all. And then she came right back 4 days later after the Melbourne Cup and won a Group 1. That wasn't enough. She went on to Hong Kong and looked the part there and was, beaten a nose by a really good Japanese horse, Windbright. This race is too short for her. 1.25 miles is like on the shorter end of what she wants to do. She's the kind of horse who will run hard and is not hapless at 1.125 miles. But from this draw and at a shorter price, I'll be happy if she runs well, but I don't particularly fancy her. What I think is noteworthy about this race, Dan, is the absolute pace void. Who do you think will be the leader into the first turn of this race?
I would think that Mo Forza has a chance to make the lead. We've seen him eager and pulling in the early portion of his races. I know the Timeform U.S. Pace Projector has instilled Regard up there on the lead, although he doesn't exactly strike you as a blazer. I wonder if John Velasquez is going to send Channel Cat. We've seen Channel Cat pull off gate-to-wire gambits with glacial paces. Maybe he'll make the front, but I agree with you. Don't have high hopes that this pace is going to be fast.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could see Channel Cat going to the front if it were 1.5 miles, but your first choice was my guess as well. Mo Forza, I think, has the best pace, and maybe that's all he needs. I mean, we talked about this horse before because one of his recent races was part of a Weekend Gameplan, failed play, and you made the salient point, which I kind of agreed with, that maybe this horse is for real and is just getting better and better. Now, I do think that he was a totally bogus Eclipse Award finalist. He has not run against older horses outside the maiden ranks yet. And these horses that he was running against in 3-year-old SoCal races don't do much for me. He's looked the part, but I mean, running against substandard opposition can make a horse look better than he actually is. If he does get an easy lead, backs it up and relaxes, I actually think he's going to be very tough. But I think there are a lot of ways to go in this race. This 30-to-1 shot admission office has had any number of horrible trips. Wouldn't shock me if he stepped up. Instilled Regard did get a good trip last time. But I do think that he still has some ways to come forward. I don't like these 1.5 mile horses turning back. The Zulu Alphas, the Arklows, Sadler's Joy, Channel Cat. I do not like those horses in this spot with a slow pace because I think they're going to get out quick to the wire off a slow pace. Without Parole, it has some appeal, but I mean, I was shocked how well he ran in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Maybe that's who he is and who he will be, because he does have old form to substantiate that performance. But I think he's going to get heavily bet in this race. And I'm not a true believer yet at this point. So I went with a longer priced, I hope, Chad Brown trainee and Sacred Life, who is 12-1 on the line. If he's close to that price, I think that's a very fair play. You get some benefit because he's been second 3 times, and everybody loves a winner, right? I mean, wins are so overvalued, I think, in handicapping. This horse has had good losses, his last race, particularly where he had more trouble than the short comment in his past performances suggest, he really had no chance, got on track late, finished with a lot of energy. I think he's going to suit the distance, and I think he's going to, the kind of horse who, if he can work out some sort of covered up trip on the outside, will be effective closing into a slow pace on the Gulfstream Park course. And as someone overlooked, Chad Brown, lightly raced American horse, who I think will get the trip, he's got some appeal to me.
Now, we saw his most recent race in the Seabiscuit where he was beaten by Next Chairs, but it was a tale of two trips to be sure. Next Chairs had a beautiful one. We saw Sacred Life held up in behind horses. It took him a while to extricate himself and get in the clear, but once he did, he came running. 12-1 on the morning line for the 11, Sacred Life. It's opening weekend at Oaklawn, and our third value play in this weekend's game plan is the 5th Season Stakes. Bravazzo the 5, Pioneer Spirit the 6, kind of a tale of two different form horses. Bravazzo's on an 11-race losing streak but gets a giant drop in class and is a reputation horse. Pioneer Spirit's been in very sharp form recently. You're looking for an alternative.
Well, when I see Bravazzo at 3-1, I feel compelled to try to take a stab at the race. I mean, because I've just never been a big Bravazzo fan. He's ran a couple big races a long time ago. I mean, he was off between the Pacific World Cup and the Clark, and his Clark did not inspire one to think that he's going to jump right back to his best form, which, in my humble opinion, was never all that great. I'm happy to have Bravazzo beat me. Pioneer Spirit got away with a pretty easy trip last time. Just held off a Brad Cox trained horse, and Cox had lost this horse $150,000. I know that he was chagrined that the horse came back and won, but it was a $75,000 stakes race. This horse is going to have to win a few of those to recoup that purchase price, that claim price, which was about as high as it is as high as you will ever see. I think that race he won, the figure he got in that race, is a huge outlier in his form. I don't think that he has really any advantage on any number of horses in this race. And even if you don't like the horse that I selected, number 1, MG Warrior, I think it's a race worth looking at because the two shortest prices on the line, at least, to me, are extremely vulnerable.
Let's talk a little bit about MG Warrior, a horse that has Oaklawn form. We're going to go back to his race last year when he finished 4th behind Pioneer Spirit. But this is a horse that occasionally pops some good races, and I wonder if he benefits from his most recent start at the fairgrounds.
I mean, that's the idea. I know that he was running that race just to get him ready for this race. It was strictly a prep. This was the race that they had as a goal for him, and you can see why. Because of the way he ran his first start there in January. Granted, he had a solid pace to close into, but I think the pace is going to be strong here. I also don't think he needs to fall quite as far back as he did in that race. I mean, he kept up decently in the slop and the tenacious at fairgrounds. I know Cox has pointed a bunch of horses to this race. I think this horse is going to cling to the rail behind really strong fractions and come running, maybe at the 3/8 pole start as a movement. I think he gets there.
3 weekend game plan selections from Marcus Hersh. Let's recap. In the Pegasus World Cup, it's the number 2 Tax. In the Pegasus World Cup Turf, it's the number 11 Sacred Life. And in the 5th Season, it's the number 1 MG Warrior. Best of luck with your wagers.